Hi, I'm Caroline Mitchell, canine behaviourist at Good Doggy. So I want to make this video today because just over the last week or two, I've had quite a few clients have come to me and they've been asking some questions about a new technique they're hearing about. They're being advised by other professionals that dogs don't need to be socialised with other dogs. And I find this so sad. This really just breaks my heart because this is expecting a social breed. Dogs are social just like us. They need to be in groups. They need to spend time with their own kind. Dogs, wolves, horses, people. We're all very, very social creatures. So expecting a social creature to suppress their basic social needs just feels really wrong. It really just breaks my heart. Socializing with their own kind is a need just like any other need. Other dogs is the hardest distraction that most people report to me. Whenever they tell me their dog won't do a recall or their dog won't listen to them in the park or whatever, it's always because there's another dog there. It's such a common problem that people have. You know, they'll say my dog's recall's great until another dog comes along, and then all they want to do is go over and see that dog, or you know, they'll walk great on their lead until another dog comes along. You know, there's loads of distractions, but other dogs is really the biggest distraction. And this is not a coincidence. It exists because dogs need to socialize. That dog that sees the other dog in the distance that is ignoring your recall is doing that because he's really trying to fulfill that need. Social needs are right there in the middle of Maslow's pyramid of needs. And if you're not familiar with this, the pyramid of needs basically defines all of an animal's needs. There's one for humans, there's one for dogs, and it puts them in order of importance. So right at the very bottom, obviously we've got things like food, water, sexual needs. Then just up from that, security needs, keeping ourselves safe and our stuff safe, our boundaries safe. And then the next one on the list is socialization. And this occurs just under training needs. And when we look at the pyramid of needs, it tells us the order of the needs that they need to be fulfilled in, the order of importance. So a dog that's really just worried about starvation, worried about food, is really not interested in securing their property. The most important need is the biggest need, and that's the one that's at the bottom. So when we get to things like socialization occurs below training. So when a dog is lacking social needs, their training is going to suffer. They're not interested in learning new things. That's going to be much harder for them. So this is really, really important. So when this dog is unfulfilled, they're not interested in the other stuff that's on the pyramid. So you're never going to be able to improve that. So these techniques involve basically denying a dog playtime. And sometimes they might appear to work because it might appear that the dog has stopped reacting. It might appear that they have stopped wanting to go and play with other dogs. Their recall might improve. But this doesn't mean that the dog is cured. Just because they have stopped reacting doesn't mean that the problem is solved. Needs don't go away when we deny them. If anything, needs get worse the longer we deny them. If you're hungry and you don't eat, that hunger need is not just going to give up and go away. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. But what can happen is that when we force a dog to deny that need, that social need to be with other dogs, other creatures, play, socialize, eventually what they might do is they might just become resigned to the fact that they are not going to get to play with other dogs. And this might appear like the problem has been solved, but actually what has happened is the dog has just given up trying. They've just realized that this is just not going to happen for them. This is not in their lot. And then you'll start to see other negative behaviors creep in, and maybe not straight away. It won't be obvious. You know, you won't deny your dog the chance to play with another dog and then suddenly get separation anxiety, but it will affect his mental health. This is basically, he's given up trying. This is a form of depression. He's resigned himself to the fact that he's not going to get these needs met. And these needs are important. This isn't just me saying this. Even the law sets standards regarding animals and animal care. And the law that applies to animal care doesn't just apply to dogs and cats and domestic creatures in our homes. This law extends to all animals, farm animals, working animals. And we all know that the laws are so basic. There is so much more that could be included in the law, but basically the law covers the absolute basics. It says your dog should have access to food and water. It should have access to shelter. There should be access to veterinary care. And it also says a dog must have company and be allowed to exhibit normal behaviour. So even the law covers this and says that our dogs should be socialising with other dogs. That is normal behaviour. That is company for them. It's not good enough just to expect them to socialise just with us. But this new training thing that's coming around that I'm hearing about is telling us that dogs should not socialise with each other and actually should become dependent on us for their social needs and their play needs and every other need that they have. They should become dependent on humans and not seek out other dogs for that. But if a dog becomes overly dependent, you end up with a dog that you can't leave anywhere. You can't leave them at home while you go to the shops even. You have to take them in the car with you. I mean, plenty of people that have dogs that they have to put in the car whenever they go places. They take them to every cafe. They can't go places that don't accept dogs. And they can't even leave them with friends and families because dependency becomes really all about you. It doesn't even become about being with people or company or dogs or cats. So those kind of usual things that you might do to try and help your dog cope better won't work for you because your dog is becoming dependent just on you. And this is bonkers really, isn't it? Because if we expected our dog to get all of their play needs out of the way just with us, we can't even play with them the way that they need to play. It's ridiculous. Play with a human for a dog is really muted and frustrating. You know, they're not allowed to bite and wrestle with us because we've taught them to suppress that when they play with us. They can't run fast. We might try, but no human is going to outrun a dog. So playing chase games is boring and not great. You know, you might try and fulfill that and, you know, maybe try to counter that with throwing a ball or something like that, which is fine, except for that's not really very good for their hips if they do too much of that. Natural play with other dogs is much more beneficial. Humans are just slow and boring and we're weak. We can't play with them the way that they really want to play. They can't just let loose and just be themselves and just enjoy that game. And they're not going to learn anything about how to socialize, how to cooperate, how to sort of, you know, regulate their emotions when they're playing with us. Really, for us, that's just a tick box exercise. You know, the dog needs to play, I'll play with the dog. And sometimes we don't even want to play the games that they want to play. You know, they might want us to chase around the garden, but we'd be much happier just to stand in one spot and throw a ball for them. So they're not really getting that proper play from us anyway. Even if we were going to try and fulfill that need for them, it just isn't going to be good enough. And aside from that, as social beings, it's really not healthy to restrict our social circle to only those that we know. We discovered this during COVID, only spending time with a very few people, with people that we really know, our husbands and our families and our kids, you know, keeping our social circle really small is not healthy for us. And we got to see people on Zoom and we got to see people at the supermarket and when we went for walks and stuff like that, but they were far away. We weren't really interacting with them. We weren't spending time with them. And this caused huge mental health problems. And even now, all these years on, those health problems, those mental health issues are still there for a lot of people. It caused low resilience, it caused anxiety, just overall, big social anxieties. People weren't coping in social situations anymore. There are still kids that can't go back to school because they're not coping properly in that school environment. It caused trauma. So we've got people here that can no longer cope with just ordinary, simple things due to the problems that were caused during COVID due to a lack of proper socialization with new people. So we can see that small social circles, they cause depression, isolation, loneliness, and sometimes these effects are long term. They don't even ease up as soon as we correct that. So we have to take extra steps. People are in counselling, people are having special support more than ever, you know, at this time now because of what happened during COVID, which obviously wasn't avoidable. We can avoid this though with our own dogs. We don't need to restrict them. that they can't play with other dogs. Of course, there are some dogs that have social issues of their own, they have their own anxieties, and we can work on those separately, and that's fine. And this might be a good place to start for them, restricting how much time, how much they can see other dogs, because at this early stage of rehabilitation, you really don't want to trigger big reactions. You want to keep those reactions low. But this is just step one of maybe 10 more steps in a whole process, which ultimately the goal is that your dog will be able to socialize with other dogs in a normal and healthy way again. This isn't the plan. It's just step one of many with a bigger goal at the end of it. And there's loads of good reasons why we should let dogs play with other dogs, not just because socialization is good for them, but play is also a release of built up stress and frustration. Some of our dogs have quite stressful days. I know it doesn't feel like it. You've got beds in every corner. They've got access to chews and lovely treats and food and the best food there is and cuddles all the time. But actually, there are a lot of things that happen in your dog's day that can create stress. Constant visitors to the front door, people coming near your gates, around your boundaries, cats visiting your garden, anything like that, just even having a little bit less sleep or being left home alone. Even dogs that can cope with this stuff or appear to be coping with this stuff, it will still take its toll on them. It's stressful. We go to work every day, and even for the ones that don't have big stresses and big problems, it does take its toll on us. Traveling to work, being at work, all of those other things create stress for us. And if we don't release that stress on a regular basis, then it will build up, and that's how we end up getting overwhelmed. Even just actually suppressing the need of playing with other dogs counts as a stressor. Wanting to play, wanting to socialize, and then being told that they can't do that, that creates frustration and anxiety on its own. Anytime your dog is suppressing a behavior, something they would really like to do, that is creating some amount of stress. And this would just all build up and build up and build up. So like the way that we would go for a run, we play sports, different ways of us releasing stress, reading a book, playing with other dogs, and playing not even just with other dogs, but playing in a natural, easy way that is as energetic and as fast as they want it to be, is a really good way to just let that stress out. So those dogs don't notice it. They're just content all the time. They just have their normal daily stressors, then they're gone. As well as that, it's a safe way to practice important skills. Social skills get practiced during play. So it's when two dogs agree to play with each other. All the normal social rules get thrown out the window. So both dogs have agreed that we are now just going to practice different things, and it doesn't mean anything, So I might pounce on you and try and grab your neck and pretend to fight with you, but it doesn't mean anything because we're just playing, and then you can pretend to fight me off, and then I'll run away screaming, "Oh no, help me, help me." And this is all part of the game. But because they've agreed to this play session, basically the rules have gone out the window, it's all in play, nothing is meant by it, they can practice all these different things. So they can practice starting fights, and they can practice ending fights, de-escalation, cooperation. These are really, really important skills that dogs need to learn, and they will learn them from each other really quickly and really easily in these play sessions. They learn how to respond to different types of dogs. When you go into the park, you'll find all kinds of different dogs. Some will be old, some might be sick, some might love to chase, some might like to wrestle, some might prefer just to sniff and be quiet, some dogs might like to explore. And your dog has to learn which dogs are which, so that he doesn't go around offending everybody, There's no point in running up to all of the old dogs and trying to make them chase him when all they want to do is just plod along at 2 miles an hour. So learning and playing, all these social skills are practiced in these sessions, and they learn how to respond and how to determine all of these other dogs and what's the best way to approach them all. As kids, we learn this too when we socialise. So now when you go into a pub, you should be able to read the room. You should be able to look around the room and say, that guy looks like he's into playing cards. That guy looks like he wants to be left alone. That guy, he's the social butterfly of the thing. He's already said hello to me. He's very welcoming and warm. And then you decide which of those people best meets your kind of needs. You've walked in the pub also with your own social requirements. Maybe you want to play cards. So you just you see if that person over there might want to spend some time with you, But these are skills that we all learn, and dogs need to learn them too. They don't just learn social skills. I said that they are practicing lots of different roles when they're playing. The rules are out the window. None of it means anything. So they are practicing hunting. They chase each other. They try and hunt each other. They stalk each other. All of these kind of behaviors they like to practice. They practice fighting with each other, wrestling. And this is so good for their confidence and for their resilience. And this is just like the kind of games that we play. Playing basketball or football or boxing or chess, all of these games involve some kind of, problems to solve. Some are done cooperatively, like basketball and football, and some are done independently. So you learn, different skills in different sports, and we all kind of get drawn to different kinds of games and different kinds of play. Some people prefer just to sit and play chess, and that's more of a mind kind of over each other battle. Tennis, much more physical. So, everybody has their thing, and dogs are the same. They all have their thing. Some like to chase, some like to wrestle, and they do a bit of everything, but they gravitate towards one thing or another. I've already mentioned that it's good for stress release. And this is important because when stress attacks our bodies, it releases cortisol, and cortisol is associated with fight or flight. So as this cortisol release increases through the day, it doesn't go away, then that fight or flight instinct doesn't go away either. So having a dog that's in constant fight or flight mode, because I haven't found an outlet to switch that off and to get rid of that stress and to relax, trigger their rest and digest mode, which I talk about quite a lot too. But if they haven't had a chance to switch that off, play does this, hunting activities do this, chasing, running, all that stuff, then they're going to be constantly in fight or flight mode. And this has its own problems. So when a dog is going around and they are constantly alert, they are constantly listening for things, they are constantly looking for things, then this makes them reactive. So dogs that are like this can become very reactive to things that they weren't reactive before. Suddenly they've noticed that sound in the background that normally they wouldn't have done because they would have been content and calm. But they've heard this noise and now they're reacting to it. Maybe they've heard a digger in another park, or they've heard a dog barking, or maybe they've seen something that surprised them. Normally they would have just gone, "Whew, what was that?" But because they're in fight or flight mode, now they've become reactive. Being in fight or flight mode causes guarding problems. Dogs can suddenly start guarding their food, guarding their toys, guarding their bed, or even just guarding some random spot on the carpet. When they are in fight or flight mode all day long, adrenaline will stop them settling through the day. As I just mentioned, there is the opposite of fight or flight is rest and digest. So if they can't get into rest and digest mode, then they are not going to be able to settle during the day. They're not going to have naps when they need them. So that's not going to be able to restore them mentally and physically. Naps are really important for that. It's not just about being lazy and being a dog. They have a purpose. So if your dog is not getting into that rest and digest mode, they're missing out on valuable sleep, which can cause stress, as we mentioned earlier, in itself, and that stress is not getting released, blah, blah, blah. It's a never-ending circle. If they're not able to settle during the day, then when you leave them, they won't settle then either. So this is a big problem for dogs that have separation anxiety, because they are just pacing, looking for stuff to do, and they will be looking for a couple of things. One, an activity to entertain themselves, because they can't rest, they can't settle. Something that kind of replicates a hunting activity, and something that releases stress. So these dogs tend to find things to chew. So they'll pull up your carpets, they'll eat your walls, they'll scratch at things, they'll tear up their bed, they'll tear up their toys, that kind of stuff. So all of those activities tick all those boxes for them. And you're not there to stop them, so the problem will just continue the whole time. If they tried to do any of these things in front of you, you'd probably take the toy away, or you would chase them away from the carpet that they're trying to dig up or whatever. But when they're on their own, nobody's there to do that. So the problem, they just continue and continue and continue until either you come home or they get bored, or enough of that anxiety is seeped out of them that they can actually final rest. So if your dog is doing this for maybe half an hour or an hour and then finally just falls asleep, it's not because they tired themselves out. It's because they finally reached a point where those cortisol levels had dropped, the fight or flight instinct had turned off, and they are now able to settle. So reducing all of that gets us to a more content dog, but our dogs will never be content while they're full of adrenaline, full of cortisol, full of stress. We know how that feels ourselves. You can't settle, you can't stop, you have to do things all the time. And that's how dogs feel when they are constantly in that state. So we can see that socialization, or a lack of it, can cause a lot of behavior problems. It can solve behavior problems if you do it the other way around. So as soon as you start to find ways to let your dog play and socialize, that will start to have an effect, and it will start to build up, and it can be a part of the solution. So lacking of socialization causes problems. The solution will be, part of that is socialization. And remember I said to you about Maslow's pyramid. I said to you that socialization is right there in the middle, and it's right underneath the training need. So socialization comes before training. While the dog is lacking in socialization, then they will not learn well. Their brains will not take on new information. They'll not be interested in learning. We need to get them to a point where they are more content with that, so that they can move up the scale, so they can start to go, right, okay, this is fine. Now I can start to learn new things. And when they're ready to learn and adapt and take on new behaviors, that's when change starts to happen. We can actually start to teach them new things. We can help them learn new behaviors to replace old ones that we didn't want, and they will take that on. They probably would have to a degree before, but it's hard work. If you feel like you're working very hard and your dog doesn't socialize very much with other dogs, but your training is it's a lot of work. You didn't think it should be this hard to teach a dog to do simple things. Then this is maybe what's happening to you, is that social need has been unfulfilled, and therefore your dog is not in the right mind in order to be taking on new stuff. Fix that need. And then all of a sudden, they'll start to be much more open to learning. They'll be much keener to learn. Treats and things like that will start to work, because they start to appreciate being rewarded, which they don't when they are in that kind of stressed out state. When they are in that content state, they are much, much easier. They want to please, they want to earn rewards, and it just makes everything better for you. So we can see that mental health problems can be caused by dogs being forced to suppress instinctive behaviors. They are being forced to fight their instincts and never really properly interacting with other dogs. They're never making new friends. They're constantly denying themselves that need to play and just be a dog. And this is really harmful. It's no different from any other need. If other needs are not being fulfilled properly, they will also have big impacts on your dog's mental health. So here's my message to you. If your dog professional is telling you that you should isolate your dogs from other dogs like this for no reason at all, not because it's a part of a long-term training plan to rehabilitate them and help them deal with anxious situations and help them manage fear and stress, not because there's a medical reason. If your dog professional is telling you that this is just how it is, that actually dogs shouldn't be allowed to socialize because they should really be coming to you fulfilling their needs, then get a new professional. That is my answer. Dogs need to socialize with each other, not just for fun, but because their mental health needs it. That got a bit ranty, but I hopefully got my point across there. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care for now. Bye-bye.